I'm Dr. Karl, coming to you from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first Australians and traditional custodians of the lands where we live, learn and work. G'day, Dr. Karl, University of Sydney, Sherlock of Science, talking with Natasha Bleicher. Is that correct pronunciation?
That is the correct pronunciation.
About this very important thing that will become more relevant over the next few decades, AI, specifically the responsible machine problem. Who is responsible if an AI, for example, give more or less jail or parole time to somebody who then either dies in jail or goes out and commits another crime? Where does the responsibility lie? You picked a big one, mate. This is huge. I mean, you're talking legal, financial, philosophical, and can you tell us something about yourself and your training and how you've found this emerging technology firm, Sterling and Rose?
Okay. I'm a lawyer.
You're a
by
lawyer?
trade.
Yep.
And I come from a background of having been a lawyer who was working as associates in the courts for a number of years in a number of countries. And then I went and had 4 children and lived in lots of different countries with my husband, who's also a lawyer. And then when I came back and my children were in school, I went back to the law. And I had this epiphany that not much had changed in the law since I'd been away for 2 years.
So what year was this in?
This was in 2015.
Oh, that was just before 2016 when Microsoft released the chatbot Tay to the world, which was supposed to run on Twitter or Xbox or whatever you call it. And the trouble was that people started tweeting at Tay, who was supposed to be a primitive AI, such racist and sexist messages that within 16 hours of Tay, T-A-Y, being released, Microsoft took it down because it turned into an awful personality spewing whatever had been given it. So you, in 2015, you had this epiphany, and then?
So I have this epiphany that I come back into the practice of law, and the practice of law hasn't changed dramatically since I had left. So I'd had a decade off, travelled all over the world, had the privilege of being able to do a lot of reading in that time and also keep up with what was happening in technology, which has always been of interest, and then wondering, well, if we're doing the same things, the technology has shifted dramatically. Is there any reason that we're not practicing law differently based on the technology that's available?
Because until then, the legal system dealt with people who are humans, who could be rehabilitated or punishment, and would behave differently depending on what punishments or rehabilitations happened at them.
So if I was to characterise what the responsible machine problem is, that the entire legal system is directed to the feelings and the bodies of humans.
There are these entities, they're humans, they have feelings, they have intellectual actions, but they also have physical bodies.
They have physical bodies. So if you think about how the law works, either through punishment or creation, through all of those steps, the law, if you do something wrong, for example, will take steps to perhaps take away your freedom. And that will have an impact on your body, but you're also going to care, or you might feel shame. So there's things that happen to you as the basis of being a human that the law impacts you. So someone might stop and say, well, no, Natasha, there are other things in the law. There are other legal entities like corporations or partnerships who are artificial and true. They're legal fictions. They don't care. But they're all still always connected back to humans. So if you have a corporation, it's still made up of a board of humans who are ultimately responsible if those entities do something wrong. The responsible machine problem is talking about this moment in time where we shift to an AI system that cannot be buffeted by feelings or a body, such that the law becomes benign in a way that it's never been benign before.
You mean because they don't have feelings, they can't be shamed, and they don't mind being switched off, suddenly they're buffeted from the repercussions of what they do?
In a way. So the trajectory that we're seeing ahead of us is that AI systems will take more responsibility in the economy. And we spend a lot of time in AI governance discussions, AI legislation discussions, talking about how do we make AI responsible. And that's words to try to say, how do we make AI ethical? How do we make AI act in a way that allows humans to remain in the loop for the decisions that it makes? But ultimately, I'll give you an example of where the law already requires us to use an AI system over a human system.
What? I wasn't told about this. I didn't get the email.
You weren't told about it, but if you were in a law firm, you would know this already. And that's in the case not of a generative AI system, which we can get into the difference, but a narrow AI system. Okay, so we've had narrow AI around for a long time. Generative AI is more the thing that everybody's talking about at the moment. But in a law firm, what we used to have is if there was an action of discovery, so that there had been a litigation that's on foot or arbitration on foot, you would discover the documents that were pertinent to the particular case. And we're sitting here in a room with lots of chairs. This is pretty much what it used to look like when I was a junior lawyer. You have lots of chairs, lots of very cheap young lawyers sitting around with lots of papers on the table, and people would look through the documents in the process of discovery to try to find the smoking gun or smoking gun document that told the truth about who should be responsible for a particular, to be able to give to the court or the judge the most seminal facts in the case.
So discovery is the term applied.
Discovery is that term. It has been now for a number of years, and there's been judicial authority on this, where it was decided that technology-assisted review, which is using narrow AI systems.
Technology-assisted review, yeah, okay.
So it's sometimes called TAR, was more accurate and more efficient and therefore cheaper than using all those junior lawyers sitting around a table. Such that if you are a law firm now and you actually charged a client for the people sitting around the table, that would, in some nations like Canada, you actually have a duty to use technology. Most people have an implied duty if it is cheaper and more efficient and more accurate than humans. In the legal system, when you start to think about that and you also start to extrapolate to other duties like directors, we talk a lot about responsible AI, but we already have this precedent that tells us when an AI system is more accurate and more efficient than a human. It's lovely to think we'll use humans to do things and make decisions, but ultimately, when you're sitting in the position of the protagonist that a decision's being made about you, and you know that that decision would be more accurate and cheaper if it was being made by an AI system, you find people starting to flip that they don't mind an AI system making decisions about them, which is when you now say, okay, if we're moving AI systems into a role as legal protagonists, or they're becoming actual stakeholders in the economy, the rules about people who have custodial duties or people who have stewardship roles in our economy, if they do the wrong thing, we make them responsible through the mechanisms of the law. And the responsible machine problem is coming down to this, saying, we know AI systems will be more responsible. We know that may be even logical to give them more responsibility. But if that's going to happen, we need to deal with the other problem, which is that the law to many people is invisible. But myself, having lived in Zimbabwe, and some of our partners that I work with who come from places like Myanmar, if you've lived somewhere where there is no law or not good functioning legal system, you start to appreciate that the law is keeping us, some would say too tightly safe, but it's keeping our systems and our enjoyment of life in a beautiful way all the time. So if you introduce a stakeholder of gravitas, like an AI system, who the law will not impact in the same way it impacts you and I, we need to really think about how do we make an AI system responsible under the law.
I had no idea that AIs were in some way required already. Secondly, you mentioned Zimbabwe, which I think has the world's highest percentage of AIDS, if not the highest, and Myanmar, which is just a brutal dictatorship where people have got very few rights. And then thirdly, the different types of AI. So at the moment, please set me straight if I'm wrong, and I often am, my understanding is that we've got, at the moment, generative AI with the ChatGPT, Perplexity and so forth, which is kind of like word prediction on steroids with some degree of accuracy. Generative is a big word, longer than the word general. But general is what we're going for, which is like general human intelligence, like look in the room and point out to me the objects that can emit a noise. So a loudspeaker might, or a spoon if you drop it. But then you talk about narrow AI, which I was not aware of. Can you just sort of fill in that gap in my knowledge? So
I sure can. Do you want me to? Sometimes I find this to be a useful way of thinking about the difference between narrow AI, which I said it's been around for a really, really long time.
Like a decade, like a whole 10 years?
More than a decade,
really?
many decades. So narrow AI systems, if you think about it like this, is that many things that are digitized are sitting in a database or a database. In a closed system, we've used AI to be able to make predictions about things in that system. So I'm going to use a shoe cupboard.
I love it when people use examples I understand.
So in narrow AI system, you might, inside a shoe cupboard, you might have lots of different coloured shoes, different sizes of shoes, different types, different gendered shoes in inverted commas, depending if you go that way. And then a narrow AI system for many years has been able to help you to sort what's in the cupboard. So it might tell you, what's the patterns we can see here? Every second shoe is a child's shoe of size 6. Tell you that on the third row, you're most likely to see red shoes. Okay? So that could have been used in astronomy for decades. It's been used in the law, as I said, looking to find documents. So the shoe cupboard could have been all the documents that came from a corporation in a discovery process. But the narrow AI system looks at what's there and establishes patterns inside the database. Generative AI is quite different because what it's done is, let's use the shoe cupboard example again. It's like walking into the shoe cupboard and you say, I would like a pair of baby shoes that have wings on them that are pink and the shoelaces are with rainbows. And the word generative there is to say you're generating a new type of shoe. So you, the person, is talking to the AI system. I'm using the word talking, okay, but giving an instruction, prompting.
Yep, prompting.
Okay. And something new that has never existed before has been generated through your prompt together with the AI system. Okay, it's machine learning. You see a very big difference here. One is telling you patterns in what it's seen, narrow AI, and generative AI is helping you to generate new things. And the new things could be images, they could be videos. The most that people in the community have seen are words, essays, letters, poems, humour, jokes, wedding speeches. In corporations, we're now starting to see something called retrieval augmented generation, where you put those two things together. The narrow AI, you've got a database, you connect the database to a large language model, and you can get particular information of a particular domain that's talking to a large language model or large multimodal model.
We already know that AIs, at least in the USA, are used to help determine parole, whether you get released early or later. And the way the systems have been set up at the moment, at least in Florida, that if you have a dark skin, forget it. You're going to go in for a longer time. If you've got a white skin, you're going to get out sooner. What about this? Suppose the AI says, release this person, who then goes out and commits a murder, and you are a family member of that person. What are your legal rights of suing, of getting recompense? Is that a bad example I've asked?
It's not a bad example, but it's good to answer it because it's a common path that people go down.
Oh, and then can you do a better one after that?
No,
Thank you.
I can't.
Okay.
So I think the common path is to say, if an AI system is making a decision about me, if that decision is unfair, do I still get to put my hand up? And you know that frustration you get when you're talking to a chatbot or something, you think, okay, I just want to talk to a real person because they'll be able to understand my situation. When you are talking particularly to a narrow AI system, it kind of gets stuck in the loop of what it's been trained to say, okay? But the question that you're actually asking is, will there remain someone who's a human in the loop that I can appeal to if that AI system has got a decision about me?
Because my inquiry is just a little bit not quite in their database. It's just a little bit of mixture of things.
That's right. One, I'm not in the database, which we can talk about. Is that right or wrong? And the second part is someone else responsible? For the short to medium term, there's always going to be, under the law, someone else responsible. So there's always going to be a judge or someone who has director's duties or someone who has legal duties or judicial duties, police duties, commissioner duties. There's still a person who's responsible. Whether that's the long-term equation will probably have something to do with whether we can solve the responsible machine problem.
Well, okay, getting back to your responsible machine problem, you do point out that there's a big difficulty a challenge in trying to attempt to extend the principles of the current legal system to machines, because do they have rights? Do they exist, and what can you do to them? And then in your...
Nooriam.
Is that the company you've set up?
Yes, it is.
Nooriam. You're saying that they're going to serve the AIs as tools and builders and collaborators and decision makers. And then you come out with the concept of it as a single legal personality and things that you can do, like should each time you deal with an AI, should you be told? I know for sure that with regard to one organisation, if you have IT problems, you can't talk to a person, you have to email in. That's handled by an AI.
Correct.
But I'm not told that when I get the email back.
I think this is an inflection point that we care, right, though.
Oh, an inflection point. This means that we should do something about it. We should jump up and down and say we need to make a decision or a change.
I was more thinking it's an inflection point that at the moment we think we care, but that's because when we're having this discussion about AI systems, we think of them something separate. You think there's AI system on one side and there's us on the other side. Where we're moving to is the AI in everything. So it'll be in your dishwasher, your mattress, your car, in your phone, and even in you.
Already there's computers in your rice cooker, so you could activate it on the way home. And I've heard of cases where a neighbour has busted into the Wi-Fi of a rice cooker and used the rice cooker to then send kiddie porn around the world.
And these are edge devices, but the point is that if your mattress and your dishwasher all have AI systems, do you want them to tap you regularly and tell you, I just want you to know I've got AI and I'm using AI to decide how long to wash your clothing for?
Maybe the first time.
Maybe the first time, that's right. But then...
At least once.
You want it to tell you at least once. And maybe you do. Yes, that makes sense. I think the question is...
Wash the clothes for me, go away, I don't care.
I think that's also probably true. Do we get to a point, which I suspect we do, where we want to know if a human makes a decision in respect of us? Because if you have an AI system, that is getting closer to what you referred to at the start, which is a general intelligence.
Oh, general is a hard one. Everybody wants a general one, and all the AI people I talk to who are making it behind the scenes saying, what we've got today isn't AI. You look back in 20 years and you say, that was not AI.
Yeah, but then that would be more clever and more efficient, maybe.
So where do we go with that?
We know that usually large changes follow the money. We also know that some of the biggest companies on earth, whether they're NVIDIA or OpenAI, are pouring enormous quantities of money, and they're very well resourced. These are not people in garages, into AI systems called AI embodied systems, so robotics. If you've seen NVIDIA's latest robotics announcement with Project Groot. And you've also obviously got OpenAI, which has a stated mandate to get to AGI, which you're quite right is incredibly difficult technically to get to AGI. Lord knows what that would look like.
You know, it was a bit like a human. And by the way, NVIDIA used to be a graphics company, and because they had hugely powerful processors, suddenly they turned out to be the go-to company to go to get your processors, and suddenly they made lots of money, and now they're fabulously wealthy.
That's right. They've got the hardware that underpins the AI. In any new jurisdiction, and let's say that technology is a new jurisdiction or digital worlds are a new jurisdiction, the first thing that goes in is the explorers. You think of this as the technologists. But what comes next is you need the law to go in to settle the new jurisdiction. And this is what we focus on, is saying, as emerging technology lawyers, what does the law need to do to respond to this new world that we're stepping into? So if there was a world that has got robotics and AI systems, how do we safely secure passage of people into a world where there are new stakeholders who don't feel and who don't have the bodies that we have, so can't be regulated the same way?
Have you got some dot point solutions? Because this sounds like it's bigger than Ben-Hur. It's
bigger than Ben-Hur. Some of the things, we have done a lot of work at Sterling and Rose on this, and we work with some government and commissions and councils on this. Some of it may be around asking AI or autonomous organisations to have to hold amounts of money, such that you could remove money from them if they did something that was rule breaking.
It's really tricky because the company is holding a big bag of money. They generate an AI. The AI then runs off itself, and humans, because the AI is going so quickly, so many million cycles per second, is coming up with decisions to make, and then it makes something that you did not plan but affects somebody badly, and so you, the holder of the bag of money, have to pay a recompense for something you didn't plan in any way whatsoever.
It's a punitive method for the AI system, such that if you remove the money, you disable in some ways its ability to take further actions. Remembering, we're not talking about AGI here, we're just talking about an AI system that is still like a corporation.
Like we have here in middle to late 2024.
And I think that problem will get worse. But that's one example of something we think is a dot point solution. But the biggest dot point solution that we think is coming is to do with what we call smart legal contracts.
I've never heard of that.
Okay, so some people call them intelligent agreements, some people call them live contracts. They've got a lot of different names. What that is the next generation of legal contracts. Let's use the analogue of cash. So most people, or depending on the age group of your listeners, would have had a world where there was primarily a cash economy with coins and notes. But over our lifetimes, that's transitioned to e-money, electronic money. So most of us pay for things with a tap and pay. It's just code. It's just noughts and ones. But it moves, the money transactions move according to our desires, but it doesn't actually involve tangible items. So most contracting is still at the physical side of contracting. So there isn't clauses in contracts that are automated or do things or keep a audit trail or have data the same way as our e-money does. So there's been a lot of work over the last few years. We've done a lot of work on what the future of contracting is, and it involves, if you have clauses, so let's just say your employment contract. What happens is the expiry period. Think about your lease, whether there might be an increase in the price of your lease after a certain part. Some of these things can actually be automated, so they take place without a human having to go out and go and tap someone or say, oh, do you remember clause 3 said to do X? These contracts can start to run themselves according to the rules that somebody has laid in them at the start of the contract.
And you're saying we should move towards this as a general background thing in all contracts so that it becomes embedded in the system?
Yes. So the reason we think it's part of a solution to AI is that in order to moderate something digital, you probably need something digital to do the moderation. You and I were talking to each other, so we're communicating. An AI system can communicate to an AI system.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of that.
So the law at the moment is primarily analog. It's not an AI system. So when you turn contracts into smart legal contracts, you're effectively bringing the rules into a live state, particularly contextual. So there's legislation. So that's rules that apply to everyone. But we all know contracts are the rules that apply to our particular relationships. So whether that's to a corporation, dealing with another corporation, whether it's a marriage contract, whatever it is, these are the rules that are contextual to us. So if I have the ability to use a contract to actually put rules and remedies around an AI system, I'm effectively bringing real-time law into the belly of the AI system.
So you're embedding it into the future systems, because I, in a primitive way, kind of was hoping that the 3 laws of robotics from Isaac Asimov, do no harm, obey orders. If you have to obey an order that means harm to a human, don't do it. I was hoping that they would in some way be embedded into AIs, that when the AI was then going to take money off you for buying a set of sheets that were crappy, it would stop doing it.
I mean, in some ways it does work. The problem with creating ethical AI systems or good, this really is about how do we create good AI systems if they're stakeholders, is that we're not very good at establishing how we're good.
Oh,
okay.
I hadn't thought of that. Wow.
So we get already stuck very, very quickly as AI ethicists or legal philosophers to say, well, which culture are you going to pick for your good AI system? When you say something like even do no harm, what does that mean? You want your AI system to not have force. So let's talk about embodied AI for a second, and I'll use a really simple example. It's not the best one, but a simple one where I have an AI system that's going to work on a mine, an embodied AI robotic system.
A mine digging minerals or something
digging,
okay,
because those are dirty jobs that are hard, expensive, dangerous jobs. So if I put an AI system inside of that, do I want that AI system to be able to respond really quickly to the law if something happens, or do I want it to be disconnected from the law?
I did some homework, believe it or not, common good and philosophy and stuff. So Immanuel Kant said, act in a way in which you would be happy for everyone to act. And that's one sort of ethical background, you know, whether you steal chocolates from a shop or not. Or the utilitarian, or from Jeremy Bentham, act in a way that produces the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Neither of those seem to be incorporated as a background philosophy or no adaptation of that. It's hard to incorporate any sort of version of that into an AI, is it? Because once you set it going, it's out of your control.
So much work that's being done at the moment. And again, if I was to give a map to you right now for the countries who are trying to, let's say, answer that particular set of questions, they can have anything from 7 items that they think make a good AI system to, I think, Singapore, has got the longest list of what makes a good AI system. You don't get all of them working at the same time, and they often point against each other. You know, they say when you're going to build something, it's either going to be fast or expensive or, I can't remember.
Quicker, better or cheaper. Pick which two you want. You can't have all three.
That's right. And this is the same problem with trying to make a good AI system. For example, you might say that you want it not to be biased. This is a really cute thing that lots of people say. They don't want AI to be biased, but it's sort of a misunderstanding, first of all, of ourselves, because we use bias all the time, and it's healthy. There's a degree of bias that makes decision making quicker, and it allows us to function in a way that the society is fluid. But at the same time, if your AI system doesn't have any bias, then it also, are you asking it to be better than us, or are you asking it to be a mirror of us?
I'd like better.
That's so temporal. My husband and I will say to our kids, oh, you guys should watch this movie that we watched in our youth, or even 10 years ago. And then you realise it's incredibly inappropriate for now. So the speed at which what's okay or good or better
changes
really quickly. So if you're going to hard code that into a system, the other one I would say on the bias point is, and this is the point about things pointing in different directions if you're trying to solve them. We had done some work where there were large corporations who wanted to, and tech companies are the same, they want to build less biased systems. And that means that they include all different stakeholders. So they include gender minorities, they include racial minorities, etc. Sounds like a great plan, doesn't it?
Yep.
However, in order to have a non-biased system, and again I'll say inverted commas, you have to actually surveil those groups in order to make the system more representative of those people. So I have seen some quite awful things, for example, where Indigenous communities have been surveilled in order to make better data sets that are more representative in decision making. It sounds like a great idea, but someone has to be watched or listened to in order to create data about them, in order for that data to then become part of the set that makes decisions about them. So these are not zero equations. There's harms that can happen through so many different layers.
I just read in the New York Times that Australia's #1 voiceover artist has been fired because AI can do a better job, better in inverted commas, and worldwide voiceover artists are being fired, graphic artists are being fired, marketing people are being fired. The majority of the journalists at the National Geographic and Sports Illustrated have been fired. That makes it hard when suddenly you have no income and you've got children and you want to feed them.
I struggle to answer this question because I don't want to be on the side of the fence that's just a panic side of the fence. But what I do think is that if you have a risk register, this is pretty good one to put on the Australian risk register. If you even had a 10% chance that in 10 years, 10% of your workforce would be at risk, that's something that you'd put in a whole bunch of policies and procedures to try to mitigate what risks are sitting there. We are seeing some countries do that. So Singapore's already doing that. I don't think we can ignore the risk that there will be employment shifts through technology.
People fired, to put it brutally.
And there's a very good reason for that, and that is, I always say, most corporations aren't charities. So if I can have your job done by an AI system for cheaper than you, that will probably increase shareholder value. If it's that moment where the technology is cheaper and more accurate, we would expect, and this is before even convergence happens, we haven't got to a state where we've got quantum computing merging with AI systems where we would expect...
Oh my God, that's going to come.
That's going to come. So it's probably likely that jobs will change. So the most often statistic that people talk about is that there's always been technological changes and humans are very resilient. And I fundamentally agree with that because I think that we can survive in extreme conditions in lots of ways and we don't need the world to look how it currently looks for us to be happy and survive. Some may argue many people are not happy in the current over-information digitized world anyway. But most people say as technology has arisen, it's meant to be a labour-saving device, but actually it's ended up giving us more work to do. So technology doesn't take jobs. That's the first conclusion. When you go into the detail more and the data on this, unfortunately, that statistic is waning insofar as you are seeing the more complex the technologies that are evolving. It's not one where people are still needed to do the same job. So this is a revolution. This is a moment where, not quite yet, it's very easy if you've only used ChatGPT to think that this technology is not going to have substantive changes, especially the free version of ChatGPT. But as I said earlier, there are things like retrieval augmented generation. There are new things that are coming, especially don't just think about words. When I said the shoe cupboard, you're not just generating images or words, you're also generating code. So a lot of tech companies, any corporation that has IT departments, many of those jobs, you could get up to 70% of your first code work being done by an AI system, which is pretty darn good.
Give me a sort of like a brief take-home message.
Two things. One, the conclusion I would want people to think about with the responsible machine problem is what is the role of contracts in our future? And I think they're part of something we really need to think about as part of the solution. The second thing, which is a little bit different, is data. Most people don't realise that they themselves are the creators of data. And it's almost like we're in a period, whether it's Russian history or medieval history, where we're the serfs, insofar as everybody I know doesn't sell their data directly. Nobody I know has their data on the marketplace and ends up with data checks in their pocket. We give our data away for free in return for services all the time, and that data is then being sold on secondary markets for huge amounts of money, because data is the mother's milk of AI. So you cannot go any further in AI without data. So if I was to say to your listeners, what is the value that I myself am making, and how do I in the future make sure that vulnerable groups, or even groups like women, are not excluded from the future of digital assets? So this is not necessarily anything to do with blockchain or weird technologies, and they will become more mainstream. This has got to do with saying data is an asset. So how do you, in your future, think about making sure that that's not just happening and being taken from you, that we organise our society and that the data creators, which is everyone, are able to also sustain the financial benefits?
Nice name, by the way, Sterling and Rose.
Thank you.
Sterling meaning honest and robust, and Rose, oh, we love the flowers. Nice name. And then you had this article about there's synthetic directors, and that's just a whole different thing. So how can people follow you and your fine work and maybe even come to work with you or for you?
Probably the place I'm most active, being a completely Gen X boring person, is LinkedIn, which I would put my most content on there.
And what's your title there on LinkedIn?
It's my name, Natasha Bleicher.
Natashablycha. Yep.
That's me. But otherwise, get in contact with Nuriam or Sterling and Rose, and this is what we do.
Thank you so much for enlightening my mind on this, Dr. Natasha. Shirtloads of Science is washed, spun and aired by the University of Sydney.